The grand throne room of Kelthera Prime stretched vast and magnificent before the assembled dignitaries. Crystal pillars rose toward a ceiling that displayed the stars themselves, captured through some technological marvel that made the room feel like the center of the universe. Representatives from 40 different species stood in carefully arranged clusters, their clothing and forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Princess Velara sat upon the secondary throne, her scales shimmering with patterns that shifted between deep purple and silver. She was young by Zelvery standards, barely 200 cycles old, but she carried herself with the absolute confidence of someone born to rule an empire that spanned 200 star systems. Her four arms moved gracefully as she gestured, each movement practiced and perfect. The human delegation stood near the back of the hall. There were only 5 of them, looking almost plain compared to the elaborate displays around them. Their dark blue uniforms were simple and functional. At the front of their small group stood Sergeant Jake Morrison, a man of average height with brown hair beginning to gray at the temples. His face was calm, his posture relaxed but attentive. Ambassador Kyle Rogers, the leader of the human delegation, was presenting a formal greeting when Princess Velara raised one of her hands. The ambassador stopped speaking immediately. "These are the humans we have heard so much about?" Velara asked, her voice carrying easily through the vast chamber. The translator devices everyone wore rendered her words into hundreds of languages simultaneously. And they seem rather unremarkable. A ripple of uncomfortable silence spread through the room. Several alien diplomats shifted nervously. "Your Highness," Ambassador Rogers began carefully, "humanity may be new to the galactic community, but we bring fresh perspectives and strong commitment to peaceful cooperation." Velara laughed, the sound like wind chimes made of metal. "Fresh perspectives? You have been traveling between stars for barely 50 of your years. My people have ruled this sector for 20,000 cycles. What could you possibly teach us?" Jake Morrison remained perfectly still, his expression unchanged. His hands stayed clasped behind his back. The princess stood and descended the steps from her throne with fluid grace. She walked directly toward the human delegation, on her escort of elite guards following at a respectful distance. She stopped in front of Jake, looking him up and down with obvious disdain. "You there," she said, pointing at him with her lower right hand. "You wear a soldier's insignia. Tell me, little human, how many battles have you fought?" "I have been in several conflicts, Your Highness," Jake replied evenly. His voice was quiet but clear. "Several conflicts," Velara repeated mockingly. She turned to address the room. "I have personally commanded fleets in 47 major engagements. My people have been warriors since before your species learned to make fire. And yet you stand here, in my father's palace, pretending to be a military representative." "I am not pretending, Your Highness," Jake said simply. "I am exactly what my uniform indicates." "How amusing," Velara said. She circled around him slowly, like a predator examining prey. "Do you know what real soldiers look like, human? They bear scars from glorious combat. They carry themselves with the weight of their victories. You look like a clerk who borrowed a uniform." Ambassador Rogers stepped forward, his face tight with restrained anger. "Your Highness, Sergeant Morrison's record speaks for itself. If you would simply access his service history—" "I attempted to do so before this meeting," interrupted a tall, insectoid alien from the Confederation of Hive Minds. His voice buzzed with genuine confusion. "The file is classified at the highest level. I found this most unusual for a mere sergeant." Princess Velara paused in her circling. "Classified?" She laughed again. "How very dramatic. What secrets could a primitive species possibly have about a common soldier?" An elderly alien with crystalline skin spoke up from across the room. Her voice was scratchy and hesitant. "Your Highness, perhaps we should inquire why the classification exists before making assumptions. In my 300 years of diplomatic service, I have learned that humans often surprise us." "The Crystalline Collective always was overly cautious," Velara said dismissively. "Very well. Human Ambassador, why is this soldier's record classified?" Ambassador Rogers glanced at Jake, who gave the smallest shake of his head. "That information is restricted, Your Highness. I apologize, but I cannot share those details in an open forum." Velara's scales rippled with colors that the translator devices indicated meant irritation and amusement mixed together. Unrestricted, classified. Such grand words for such a small, unremarkable person. She turned back to Jake. Tell me, Sergeant, have you ever personally commanded forces, led troops into battle? I have led operations, yes, Jake replied. Operations, she repeated with scorn. Not battles, not wars. Operations. Like a technician. She addressed the room again. This is what happens when a species reaches for the stars before they are ready. They send children to do the work of warriors. They classify ordinary service records to make themselves seem important. A stocky alien with 6 tentacles raised one appendage. Your Highness, if I may, the human delegation was invited here specifically because of their recent success in mediating the border dispute between the Talaxian kingdom and the Voru clans. They accomplished in 3 months what we could not manage in 5 years. Anyone can talk, Velara said. Words are easy. War is hard. Leadership is hard. This human knows nothing of such things. Look at him. He does not even defend himself against my words. Jake remained silent, his breathing steady and calm. Pathetic, the princess declared. She returned to her throne and sat down with a dramatic flourish. Send these humans to the lower guest quarters. They are not worthy of the diplomatic suites. An older Zelvari male, dressed in the robes of a senior advisor, leaned close to Velara's throne. He whispered urgently in her ear. The princess waved him away impatiently. I do not care about protocols or traditions, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. These humans are beneath this court's dignity. The advisor tried again, his voice more insistent, but Velara cut him off with a sharp gesture. The royal gardens stretched across 5 acres of carefully maintained landscape. Alien plants from a dozen conquered worlds grew in artistic arrangements, their colors and shapes blending in ways that seemed impossible. Water features created a constant symphony of gentle sounds. Pathways of polished stone wound through the greenery like silver ribbons. Princess Velara walked through her favorite training ground, a circular arena at the garden's heart. The arena was surrounded by flowering trees that released sweet scents into the air. Her combat instructor waited there, along with several members of the royal court who had come to watch her morning practice, and the human delegation had been given rooms in the lower section of the palace, as she had ordered. Velara expected them to complain or demand better treatment. Instead, Ambassador Rogers had sent a polite message thanking her for the accommodations and requesting permission to tour the gardens. She had granted it with amusement. Let them see the glory of Zelvari culture. Let them understand how far beneath her people they truly were. She was surprised when Jake Morrison appeared at the edge of the training arena. He walked alone, without his ambassador or the other humans. He wore simple exercise clothing rather than his uniform. He stopped at the arena's edge and watched quietly. Velara finished her combat sequence, moving through the traditional forms with speed and precision. Her 4 arms wielded practice weapons that blurred through the air. When she completed the routine, she noticed the human still standing there. Did you come to learn something, Sergeant? She called out. Perhaps to see what real martial skill looks like. I came to walk through the gardens, Your Highness, Jake replied calmly. They are very beautiful. I did not mean to interrupt your training. You did not interrupt anything, Velara said. She set down her practice weapons and walked toward him. An idea formed in her mind, one that brought a smile to her face. Tell me, do humans train for combat? Or do you simply rely on your technology to fight your battles for you? We train, Jake said, both in physical combat and in strategy. Physical combat, Velara repeated. She gestured to the arena. So, then perhaps you would honor me with a demonstration. A friendly sparring match? Unless you are afraid? Several members of the court whispered to each other. Jake looked at the princess for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If Your Highness wishes, I would be happy to accept. Excellent, Velara said, her scales brightening with anticipation. This should be educational for you. Jake stepped into the arena. One of the court members brought him a practice staff, the traditional weapon used in Zelvari sparring. He accepted it with a small bow of thanks. Velara took her own staff and moved to the opposite side of the arena. The rules are simple, human. We fight until one person yields or can no longer continue. No strikes to kill or permanently injure. Everything else is permitted. Do you understand? I understand, Jake said. Begin, Velara announced, and she attacked. She moved like liquid lightning, her staff spinning in patterns that would have overwhelmed most opponents in seconds. Her forearms gave her angles of attack that two-armed species struggled to defend against. She had trained since childhood. She had defeated champions from 6 different warrior cultures. Jake's staff moved to intercept hers. He deflected her strikes, turning them aside without attempting to counterattack. His movements were economical, using just enough force to redirect her weapon. Velara pressed harder, increasing her speed. Her staff came from high and low, from left and right, in combinations that should have been impossible to predict. Jake continued to deflect, his breathing steady, his feet moving in small, precise steps that kept him balanced. Fight back, Velara demanded. Are you too weak to attack? Jake said nothing. He simply continued his defensive pattern, his eyes tracking her movements with calm focus. In the crowd around the arena, an ambassador from the Kron Empire leaned toward his companion, a dignitary from the Stellar Federation. Those movements, the Kron ambassador whispered. I have seen them before, in military archives. Which archives? The other alien asked quietly. The Krell War documentation. There was a human military advisor whose fighting style was analyzed by 17 different intelligence agencies. He never attacked, only defended, but no one could touch him. The file was incomplete, marked as classified. What was the advisor's name? The Kron ambassador shook his head. It was redacted. But the movement patterns match exactly. Back in the arena, Velara was beginning to breathe harder. She had been attacking for 5 minutes without pause, and she had not landed a single strike. Frustration built inside her chest like heat. This was supposed to be a simple demonstration of superiority. This human was supposed to be helpless before her skill. She changed tactics, feinting high before sweeping low at his legs. Jake stepped over the sweep and deflected her follow-up strike with minimal effort. She tried a spinning attack that used all 4 arms in a whirlwind assault. Jake moved backward 2 steps and let the strikes pass through empty air where he had been standing. Stop running, Velara snapped. Face me properly. I am facing you, Your Highness, Jake said. His voice was not even winded. I am simply choosing not to attack. Why? Velara demanded. She paused in her assault, staff held ready. Are you mocking me? Do you think yourself so superior that you need not even try? No, Your Highness, Jake said. I simply see no purpose in attacking someone who has offered me hospitality, even if that hospitality came with harsh words. Velara's scales flushed dark purple with anger. I am not offering hospitality. I am teaching you a lesson about your place in this galaxy. She attacked again, abandoning technique in favor of raw aggression. Her staff struck like a hammer, over and over, seeking any opening in his defense. Jake's staff met each strike, the sound of wood on wood echoing through the gardens. He moved in a small circle, always turning, always balanced, never extending himself into a vulnerable position. More 10 minutes passed, then 15. Velara's arms began to ache. Sweat made her scales glisten in the morning light. Jake's breathing had increased slightly, but his defense remained perfect, unbreakable. The elderly crystalline collective ambassador spoke up from the crowd. Your Highness, perhaps this is enough. The human has proven himself capable. He has proven nothing, Velara gasped out between strikes. He only runs and hides. A communication device chirped urgently. One of Velara's advisors rushed forward, his face showing deep concern. Your Highness, urgent news. The Korthax horde has attacked the colony on Viridian 7. Casualties are severe. Velara lowered her staff immediately. What? The Korthax have not moved against us in 30 cycles. They claim we violated territorial agreements, the advisor said. He looked at his data tablet, his expression growing more troubled. The military council is convening. They are requesting something called the Morrison Protocol. Every alien in the garden turned to look at Jake Morrison. The War Council chamber was circular, with a holographic display dominating the center of the room. The display showed Viridian 7, the colony world now under attack. Red markers indicated Korthax ships surrounding the planet. Blue markers showed the limited Zelvari defense forces trying to protect civilian evacuation ships. Princess Velara sat at the head of the council table, still wearing her training clothes. She had not taken time to change. Around her sat military commanders, senior advisors, and representatives from allied worlds. The human delegation had been summoned as well. Jake Morrison stood near Ambassador Rogers, his expression calm despite the crisis unfolding on the display. "We must respond with overwhelming force," declared General Corthan, the supreme commander of the Zelvari fleet. His scales were battle-scarred and darker than Velara's. "The Korthax have committed an act of war. We send the 3rd and 5th fleets immediately." "That will take 6 days to mobilize," another commander objected. "The colony will fall before then." "Then we send what we have ready now," Corthan insisted. "We show them that attacking the Zelvari Empire brings only death." Ambassador Rogers cleared his throat. "General, if I may suggest, perhaps we should understand why the Korthax attacked before we commit to military action." "Why they attacked?" Corthan turned to face the human, his voice filled with contempt. "They attacked because they are raiders and barbarians. They see weakness and they strike. There is nothing more to understand." "Actually," said Ambassador Kyle Rogers carefully, "there is always more to understand, which is why we requested Sergeant Morrison be present at this council." Velara looked sharply at Jake. "What does a sergeant have to do with strategic military planning?" "Everything, Your Highness," Rogers replied. "If you will permit me, I believe it is time to share information that has been classified until now." Velara gestured impatiently. "Speak then. We have no time for games." Rogers looked at Jake, who nodded slightly. The ambassador took a deep breath. "Sergeant Jake Morrison is not simply a soldier. He is a specialist in what human military calls systemic conflict resolution. 5 years ago, he was the primary architect of the Krell Empire's collapse." Silence filled the chamber. Every being present knew about the Krell Empire. It had controlled 80 star systems and had been considered one of the 3 most powerful forces in the galaxy. Then, in less than 2 years, it had fallen apart from within. "Impossible," General Corthan said flatly. "The Krell fell because of internal corruption and rebellion. Their subject worlds rose up against them." "Yes," Rogers agreed. "They did, because Sergeant Morrison showed them how. He spent 18 months embedded within Krell society, documenting their crimes, building networks among the oppressed populations, and creating the conditions for peaceful revolution. Not a single shot was fired by human forces. The Krell Empire destroyed itself because Jake Morrison made it impossible for them to continue." Velara stared at Jake, searching his face for any sign of pride or arrogance. She found none. He simply stood there, waiting. "The Thrace Dominion," spoke up the Krone ambassador. 3 years ago, they controlled trade routes through the Malus Corridor. Then their entire administrative system collapsed. Was that also this human? Rogers nodded. Jake spent 8 months learning their bureaucratic systems. He found the inefficiencies, the corruption, the ways their own regulations contradicted each other. He published everything publicly. The Dominion spent 2 years trying to reorganize and failed. They dissolved peacefully into independent systems. An alien with crystalline features leaned forward. The Vaxxan Confederacy expansion. They were planning to conquer the 12 free worlds. The conquest never happened. The Vaxxan simply stopped. Because Sergeant Morrison brokered a trade alliance between the 12 free worlds that made them more valuable as partners than as conquered territories, Rogers explained. The Vaxxan leadership chose profit over war. No battles fought, no lives lost. Velara felt something cold forming in her stomach. She remembered her words in the throne room. Primitive newcomers. Common soldier. Unremarkable. She had mocked this man in front of the entire diplomatic assembly. "Why is a soldier doing diplomatic work?" she asked quietly. Jake spoke for the first time since entering the council chamber. "Because I am not really a soldier, Your Highness. I am a student of systems. Military systems, political systems, economic systems. I study how they work and how they fail. Sometimes I help them fail faster when they cause suffering. You destroy empires, Velara said. I help empires destroy themselves, Jake corrected gently. Usually by exposing the truth about what they really are. The Krell enslaved millions. The Thrace stole from their own people. The Vaxen were expanding out of fear, not strength. I simply showed everyone what was already there. General Corthan slammed his fist on the table. This is all very interesting, but we have a crisis now. What does any of this have to do with the Korthax? Everything, Jake said. He walked to the holographic display and studied it for a moment. The Korthax horde has not attacked anyone in 30 years. Suddenly they strike a colony world and claim territorial violations. That does not match their historical patterns. Something has changed. They are barbarians, Corthan repeated. Barbarians do not need reasons. Everyone has reasons, Jake said. He turned to face the council. Give me access to your intelligence files on the Korthax. Give me communication channels. Give me 12 hours. If I cannot find a peaceful solution by then, you can send your fleets with my blessing. 12 hours? Corthan laughed harshly. Hundreds are dying right now. Actually, Jake said, pointing to the display, the Korthax ships are maintaining a blockade, but they are not attacking the surface anymore. They stopped the bombardment 3 hours ago. They are waiting for something. I need to find out what. Velara looked at the display. Jake was right. The Korthax fleet had settled into a holding pattern. She looked at her military commanders, then at Jake Morrison. This man had ended empires without firing weapons. He had changed the galaxy through understanding rather than force. She had called him unremarkable. She had mocked his service. She had challenged him to combat to prove her superiority. Give him what he needs, Velara said quietly. Your Highness, Corthan protested, we cannot trust our security to a human who destroys governments. He destroys governments that deserve to fall, Velara said, her voice stronger now. Perhaps we should be grateful he is offering to help rather than studying how to dismantle ours. She turned to Jake. You have your 12 hours, Sergeant. Show us what a human specialist can do. Jake bowed slightly. Thank you, Your Highness. I will need a private communication room, on access to your diplomatic archives, and one thing more. What is that? Velara asked. I would like Your Highness to be present during my communications with the Korthax, Jake said. You are royalty. They will take the negotiation more seriously if you participate. Velara felt her scales shift color with surprise. After everything she had said to him, he was asking for her help. Why would you want me there? Because you care about your people, Jake said simply. That matters more than anything else. The private communication room was small compared to the grand spaces of the palace. A single curved table faced a large display screen. The walls were lined with technology that could translate hundreds of languages and encrypt communications across vast distances. Jake sat at the table with a data tablet, scrolling through files that detailed decades of Korthax history. Princess Velara sat beside him, watching him work. She had changed into formal robes, though Jake had told her it was not necessary. She felt the need to look proper, to represent her people with dignity. It was strange how much his opinion had begun to matter to her in just a few hours. What are you looking for? She asked as Jake moved through another file. Patterns, Jake replied without looking up. The Korthax have been quiet for 3 decades. Before that, they raided frequently, but never held territory. They took supplies and left. Classic behavior of a displaced population seeking resources. Displaced? Velara frowned. They have their own systems. Had, Jake corrected. He pulled up a star map. Look here. This is Korthax territory 35 years ago. The map showed a cluster of 7 star systems. Now look at current maps. He switched the display. Only 3 systems remained marked as Korthax holdings. Velara leaned closer. What happened to the others? Stellar phenomena, Jake said, pulling up scientific reports. A chain reaction of solar instability in the Korthax region. It started 40 years ago and accelerated. 4 of their core systems became uninhabitable. The radiation from dying stars made 3 more systems too dangerous for long-term settlement. I did not know this, Velara said quietly. Most people do not, Jake replied. The Korthax are a proud people. They did not ask for help. They tried to manage the crisis themselves. But millions of their people needed new homes. When they stopped raiding 30 years ago, and I think they believed they had found a solution. Jake pulled up another file, this one showing territorial agreements from 3 decades past. Here, the Korthax signed a settlement agreement with several governments, including the Zelvari Empire. They were granted permission to settle in the outer regions of various territories, in areas considered marginal or undesirable. Velara read through the agreement. She had never seen it before. It had been signed by her grandfather long before she was born. The Viridian system, she said, her eyes widening. We granted them settlement rights in the Viridian system. In the outer asteroid belts in the 7th planet, Jake confirmed. But not on Viridian 7 itself. That world was kept for future Zelvari expansion. But we did expand there, Velara said, you understanding beginning to dawn. The colony on Viridian 7 was established 8 years ago. Exactly, Jake said, and I am willing to bet that the colony expanded beyond its original charter. Mining operations, resource extraction, atmospheric processors, all of which likely pushed into areas where the Korthax had settled. Velara felt shame burning in her chest. We violated our own agreement. Probably without realizing it, Jake said gently. These things happen when empires grow. Local administrators make decisions. Borders shift. Original agreements are forgotten. But for the Korthax, who lost their homeworlds and have nowhere else to go, this settlement area might be all they have left. So they attacked to defend what is theirs, Velara said. Maybe, Jake replied. Or maybe they attacked to get someone's attention. To force a conversation that no one was willing to have otherwise. He looked at her directly. Either way, I think they are desperate. And desperate people can be reasoned with if you address their real needs. How do we do that? Velara asked. We talk to them, Jake said. Honestly, we acknowledge the problem. We listen to what they need. And we find a solution that lets everyone survive. My military commanders want to destroy their fleet, Velara said. Your military commanders are thinking short-term, Jake replied. Destroy this fleet and the Korthax will simply build another. You will have war for generations. But if you can solve the underlying problem, you might gain allies instead of enemies. Velara took a deep breath. Contact them, she said. Jake worked the communication controls. After several minutes, the display screen activated. A Korthax appeared on the screen. His species looked almost reptilian, but with features that suggested mammalian ancestry as well. His skin was tough and ridged. His eyes were large and intelligent. He wore armor that looked old but well-maintained. I am War Leader Thaxon of the Korthax Horde, the alien said. His voice was deep and rough. Who speaks for the Zelvari Empire? I am Princess Velara, daughter of Emperor Zelkoth III, Velara said, keeping her voice steady. I speak with the authority of the throne. Thaxon's eyes narrowed. You send a princess to negotiate our surrender? We will not yield, even to royalty. We are not here to demand surrender, Jake said, speaking before Velara could respond. We are here to understand what happened and to find a solution. And who are you? A small one? Thaxon asked. My name is Jake Morrison. I represent humanity's diplomatic corps. Princess Velara has asked me to assist in these negotiations. Thaxon made a sound that might have been a laugh. The mighty Zelvari need humans to speak for them now? How times have changed. Times have indeed changed, Jake said calmly. Your homeworlds are gone. Your people need new places to live. The Zelvari expanded into territory you were promised. Both sides have legitimate grievances. Both sides have made mistakes. The question is whether we can fix this together or whether we will fight a war that serves no one. Thaxon was silent for a long moment. You know about our worlds, he said finally. Most species think we are simply raiders and thieves. I know you are refugees, Jake said. I know you signed settlement agreements that were supposed to protect you. I know those agreements were violated, probably by mistake rather than malice. And I know that attacking a colony was the only way you could think of to make people listen. You understand much, human, Thaxon said. His voice had softened slightly. I understand that everyone in this situation wants the same thing, Jake said. Safety for their people, a place to call home. A future that does not involve constant fighting. Am I wrong? You are not wrong, Thaxton admitted. Then let us find that future together, Jake said. Tell us what you need. All of it. Be honest with us, and we will be honest with you. Thaxton looked at Velara. Will the Zelvari Empire honor what is decided here, Princess? Velara felt the weight of the moment. Her father was off-world on a diplomatic mission. She was acting in his place. Whatever she agreed to would bind the Empire. She thought about her training, her pride, her certainty that she knew what strength looked like. Then she thought about Jake Morrison, who had ended empires with patience and understanding. Yes, she said firmly. I give you my word as heir to the throne. Whatever we agree to here, the Zelvari Empire will honor. 3 weeks had passed since the crisis at Viridian 7. The palace balcony where Princess Valyra stood overlooked the capital city of Kelthera Prime. Thousands of lights glowed in the evening darkness, representing millions of lives going about their business in peace. The air was cool and pleasant, carrying the scent of night-blooming flowers from the gardens below. Jake Morrison stood beside her, looking out at the same view. He wore his formal uniform this time, prepared for his departure. His transport ship would leave in 2 hours, carrying him and the human delegation back to Earth. I still cannot believe it worked, Velara said quietly. When you proposed giving the Korthax an entire sector of space, I thought my military commanders would start a rebellion. Jake smiled slightly. They were not happy, he agreed. But the sector you offered was mostly empty space with marginal resources. You were not using it. For the Korthax, it represents hope, room to grow, a place where their refugees can finally settle permanently. And in exchange, they shared their knowledge of the unstable stellar region, Velara continued. Their scientists have been studying the phenomenon for 40 years. That information alone is worth more than the territory we granted. More than that, Jake said. You gained allies. The Korthax have agreed to joint defense agreements and trade partnerships. In 10 years, this crisis will be remembered as the beginning of a valuable friendship. Velara's scales shifted through colors that indicated mixed emotions. I almost destroyed that possibility before it could begin. If I had sent the fleets as General Korthan wanted, thousands would have died. The Korthax would have become permanent enemies, all because I was too proud to listen. You listened when it mattered, Jake pointed out. That is what made the difference. Only because you were there, Velara said. She turned to face him directly. I mocked you in the throne room. I called you primitive and unremarkable. I challenged you to combat to prove my superiority. I treated you with disrespect and arrogance. You did, Jake agreed calmly. And yet you still helped us, Velara said. Why? You could have let us fail. You could have stood back and watched the Zelvari Empire make terrible mistakes. Given your history, you probably could have used our failures to bring about changes you thought were necessary. Jake was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. I could have, he admitted, but that is not why I do this work. I do not tear down empires for the sake of destruction. I only act against systems that cause unnecessary suffering and refuse to change. You were willing to change, Your Highness. The moment you understood the truth about the Korthax situation, you made different choices. Because you showed me a better way, Velara said. You showed me that true strength is not about having the biggest fleet or winning every fight. It is about understanding, about finding solutions that serve everyone, about building something lasting instead of destroying everything that opposes you. Those are lessons humans learned the hard way, Jake said. We fought terrible wars against each other. We caused suffering that still haunts our history. We almost destroyed ourselves several times. Eventually, enough of us realized that there had to be a better approach. We still make mistakes. We still struggle. But we try to build bridges now instead of walls. Velara walked to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the city. I have been thinking about what kind of empress I will be when my father passes the throne to me. Before you came, I thought I knew the answer. I would be strong, decisive. I would expand our empire and ensure that no one could challenge our power. And now? Jake asked. Now I think about what real power means, Velara said. The Zelvari Empire controls 200 star systems. We have the third largest fleet in the galaxy. We have wealth and technology and ancient traditions. But we did not even know that we had broken our word to the Korthax. We did not know that our expansion was causing a humanitarian crisis. We were so focused on our own strength that we forgot to pay attention to how we affected others. She turned back to Jake. I have asked my father to create a new position in our government, an Office of External Impact. Its job will be to monitor how our policies affect other species, especially smaller groups and displaced populations. I want us to keep our promises. I want us to know when we are causing harm, even accidentally. That is an excellent start, Jake said with genuine approval in his voice. I am also reforming our diplomatic corps, Velara continued. Too many of our ambassadors think like I used to think. They see diplomacy as a tool for domination rather than cooperation. That needs to change. These reforms will face resistance, Jake warned. People who benefit from the old ways will not welcome new approaches. I know, Velara said, but I am the heir to the throne. I have authority, and more importantly, I now have proof that different methods work better. The Korthax crisis could have become a decades-long war. Instead, it became a partnership. That success speaks louder than any argument I could make. Jake nodded. You will make a fine empress, Your Highness. Better than you would have been 3 weeks ago. Velara felt emotion tightening her throat. I owe you an apology. A public one. When you return to the throne room for the farewell ceremony, I intend to formally acknowledge my mistakes and thank you for your service to the Zelvari people. That is not necessary, Jake said gently. It is absolutely necessary, Velara insisted. I insulted you in front of the entire diplomatic assembly. I will apologize in front of that same assembly. It is a matter of honor. My honor, not yours. Jake studied her face for a moment, then bowed his head in acceptance. As you wish, Your Highness. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, unwatching the city lights. Finally, Velara spoke again. May I ask you something personal? Of course. When I was attacking you in the arena, you never struck back. Not once. Were you afraid of hurting me, or was it something else? Jake considered the question. I was not afraid of hurting you physically. Your armor and natural toughness would have protected you from serious harm. I simply saw no value in winning a fight that did not need to happen. You wanted to prove you were superior. Fighting back would have reinforced that this was a contest about dominance. By only defending, I tried to show that there were other ways to think about strength. Did you know then that you would end up helping us? Velara asked. No, Jake admitted. I had no idea about the Korthax situation, so I simply believe that responding to aggression with more aggression rarely leads anywhere good. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to fight. That is a lesson I will remember, Velara said. She extended her upper right hand in the human gesture of friendship that Jake had taught her. Thank you, Jake Morrison, for your patience, for your wisdom, for showing me what I could not see on my own. Jake shook her hand, his smaller human hand almost disappearing in her larger grip. Thank you for being willing to learn. That is rarer and more valuable than you might think. A chime sounded from Jake's communication device. That is my reminder, he said. Time to go to the farewell ceremony. They walked together through the palace corridors toward the throne room. Velara felt different than she had 3 weeks ago. Lighter somehow, despite carrying more responsibility. She had learned that admitting mistakes did not make her weak. She had learned that listening was more powerful than commanding. She had learned that the most formidable people were often the quietest ones, the ones who changed the world without ever raising their voice. As they entered the throne room where hundreds of dignitaries waited, Velara thought about the future. Not the future she had imagined before, full of conquest and domination. But a different future. One where the Zelvari Empire became known not for the size of its fleets, but for the wisdom of its leadership. One where strength meant protecting others rather than threatening them. It was a future worth building. And it had started with one human sergeant who had taught a proud princess that sometimes the greatest victories came without firing a single shot.